good morning, and welcome to the original Loretta Brown Show, radio to open the heart, heal the soul, and awaken the consciousness. Benny,
Yes,
yes.
yes. I'm bringing in my cooling spirits.
Thank
Please
you.
bring me more cooling spirits.
Yeah, apparently there's no air conditioning in the radio station, and
Yeah, I mean, we've done pretty good for about a week now, and so we're waiting for, I don't know if people can see me online, parts. They say we were supposed to receive some parts. We did get a couple. It didn't work. So we had to get more, and we're waiting for the arrival. There's a big backlog, for these parts, apparently, along with other things in this world.
yep.
But we're doing okay. I've been able to manage and hovered around 78. So not bad.
Not bad. I'm
Not
I'm
bad.
impressed with that. So
Thank you.
you're in a long-term sauna, some sort of
Uh,
a
yeah, it's not
spiritual
that bad. I
practice.
mean,
Yep.
yeah, I've got about 5 fans working for me right now. I've got one little baby one here on the counter right there. If you can see, I could show you the camera, but I don't want to, bore
No,
everybody.
no, I can see the calendar moving behind you.
Oh yeah,
Like a
right.
little-
That's not just like my magic that I can perform.
yes, yes, I got it. Well, I'm glad you've managed to keep it kind of cool,
Yeah,
and looks
like
like we've
me.
got sun. Yes, yes, like you, of course.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
of course. And we've got some great weather coming up, and
We do.
we've got the 4th of July weekend. So I hope people are going to have a good time. Yeah. What were
Yep,
you
and
going to
also
say?
stay safe for sure. And I don't know if you have any plans. We're just gonna hang out and relax. I mean, I know
Mhm.
a lot of people are kind of pulling back this year too. I mean, with the
Yep.
up, tick and the gas prices and so forth. But let's enjoy it and have a good time and be safe.
Yep. Sounds
Mhm.
like it. Yeah. Anyway, so I am Loretta Brown. I'm the owner of a Reiki Oasis located right here in the greater Seattle area for the last 27 years. And we do lots of things over there. A couple of quick announcements. You can find out more about me at ReikiOasis.com. And then every Sunday morning at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, you can join me for a meditation. If you cannot join me live via Zoom, you can sign up for the meditation and I'll send you a recording of it. And these meditations are just to help you. I mean, I call my business Reiki Oasis because the idea is an oasis, like step away from everything, just take a minute, tune into yourself, maybe get a little bit healthier in mind, body, and spirit. And so they're gentle healing meditations. And I don't know, sometimes there's angels in there and things like that. It's your experience. Also, a big shout out to my patrons. Thank you so much. I am a listener supported show, and all of you help bring these wonderful people to the radio waves to hopefully bring some help and inspiration um, to your life, right? We could all use a little drink of water once in a while. So, we are leaving June on the tail end of the ultra sensitive June 28th Cancer new moon. Everybody's emotional. Cancer is a watery sign. And just before this full moon peaked, Neptune entered Pisces, bringing in more watery energy. I want to remind you that this little check in with astrology is about energies for me. And these energies are out there, and we always are greater than all of this. But, if I look out the window and it's a blizzard, I'm going to dress differently than if it's 100 degrees sunshine. So just be aware of it. This Cancer new moon also conjuncted something called the black moon Lilith, which represents the divine feminine flame that burns within all. This flame has been ignited in many of us recently, if it wasn't ignited before. And black moon Lilith is a mathematical point between the earth and the moon. It represents the rising of feminine consciousness out of repression and into a state of fullness. Take a breath and think about that. So the astrology shows us that there is much more to unfold. And I want to remind my listeners, we are coming out of the Kali Yuga. We're coming out of it. It's a time of darkness of consciousness, I might say. And my guest might even know more about it than I do. I don't know. But we cannot solve our problems with the same sort of mindset that got us into these problems. And I've been doing a lot of talking with people, and I don't want to run off onto a side note because, my work is spiritual and uplifting. But I want to remind you that it is sometimes those things that happen to us, everything, there's just one God, call it God, call it creator, source, whatever, that created everything. And these things are often there as opportunities to encourage us to move forward and become the very best that we can be. So it's a kind of a short nutshell of that, right? So Black Moon Lilith, feminine power, what does that mean? You get to sort through that. I want to remind you, Mars, the planet of war and aggression, will be in Aries. It loves being in Aries, this fiery sign, from June 26th to August 10th. And this is going to bring innovative but aggressive energy that could erupt into violence if we don't do our part to stay away from it. As we step into July, we're going to receive a burst of high frequency energy from the Sirius portal. And I don't mean Sirius, S-E-R, like it's heavy. It's Sirius, the star. Ancient astrologers called Sirius our spiritual sun, as it was believed to be a portal to the heavens. And from July 4th to 5th, our sun aligns with Sirius, beaming high frequency energies our way and allowing us to soak up its heavenly vibrations. I think we could use that. As our sun warms our physical body, Sirius warms our spiritual body, and they merge together. It is a time to try to find balance and harmony between our body and our soul. The galactic energies from Sirius can also give us a boost, helping us to recharge and find new inspiration. In modern astrology, Sirius is associated with freedom and technological advancements, and we can also use this energy to support innovation in the area of technology and to find a greater creative freedom. Many people may receive downloads, uploads, a greater connection to their higher selves, the divine, during this portal about the path forward. And I've been kind of noticing across the base of my clientele for quite some time now, the last few years in particular, the last few months, maybe the last 6 weeks, everybody's kind of coming in with this, it's kind of a question of what can I do now? What should I do now? What is my destiny? So there's a tugging at the heart of ourself to become who we're meant to be. Sirius is also believed to be home to an advanced alien race. I think the advanced alien race lives on planet Earth. But anyway, if you feel your starseed origins are from Sirius, this could be a power time for you to reconnect with your Sirian gifts. Always, always, always remember that the divine lives within you and you are co-creator of all that is around us. So I just want to say, remember, everything is designed to help bring us to our highest path, especially on a collective level. So beautiful astrology weather to all of you. And I want to bring in my guest because I can't wait to talk to him. I have today Rabbi Rami Shapiro, Ph.D. And he has a reputation apparently for being perhaps the most unorthodox rabbi you'll ever meet. Growing up, his mother, beautiful Jewish mother apparently, thought he might be the Messiah, while his father was convinced he was a luftmensch, I might have said that wrong, an airhead. He earned rabbinical ordination from Hebrew Union College in order to preach his ideas in synagogues, and a Ph.D. in contemporary Judaism from Union Graduate School in order to teach his ideas in universities. However, along the way, he's taken Bodhisattva vows in Zen Buddhism, became a 32nd degree Mason in the Scottish Rite, was initiated into the Ramakrishna order of Vedanta Hinduism, joined the Theosophical Society, published, 36, 37, 87 books. I don't know, Rabbi, you're going to tell us. And he had his poems included in prayer books and hymnals around the English-speaking world. And he has also walked the 12 steps of Overeaters Anonymous more times than he can count. We're going to be discussing his newest book, Judaism Without, I was going to say craziness. I don't know where that came from. Judaism Without Tribalism, a guide to being a blessing to all the peoples of the earth. Wow. Welcome to the show, Rabbi Rami. I'm so glad to have you.
Well, it is a delight to be here, Loretta. Thank you very much for having me. So can I
Yes, please.
jump in without even waiting for you to ask me a question?
Yes.
I am absolutely enthralled with everything having to do with the divine feminine and the divine mother. I've written 2 books on the divine mother or the divine feminine in Jewish literature, biblical literature. I've got a 3rd called The Gospel of Sophia, which I don't know if I'm ever going to publish, but it is written.
Oh.
And I have had
Okay.
multiple experiences of the divine mother and consider myself a devotee of hers, as well as all the other things. I mean, I'm very eclectic. You can tell from my bio, but this whole notion of Black Moon Lilith is really fascinating, and the rise of feminine energy. I'm not sure if we're at the end of the Kali Yuga or in the middle. I mean, I don't know. I do think that that the gift of Kali at this moment is the gift of creative destruction.
Yeah.
And we see that all around us. When I first started seeking guidance in this realm and sharing my experiences with teachers, what was explained to me is that the mother, her love for us is fierce, and it is a love that strips us of everything that's false in us and maybe in society at large. We may be seeing that, but it's not necessarily pleasant. She's not my mother, who, thought I might have been the Messiah. But, it's not like, oh, you can do no wrong. It's like, here's where you're stuck. Here's where you're trapped. Here's where you're imprisoned in ideas that are maybe self-serving, ego-serving, but not self-serving with a capital S, not soul-feeding, and certainly not society-serving. So I didn't know anything about the Black Moon Lilith. So just listening to you, what you said, I think that I agree. That is what's happening. I see it in a lot of other realms. Yeah. The mother is returning as a living archetype in our spirituality. Not everyone, obviously. There are many men specifically, but not only. Yeah. People who are associated with the patriarchy in one way or another, who are fighting her tooth and nail. But her return, if that's the right word, or her rising, is going to be a harrowing and a cleansing for the entire planet. Yeah. Cannot be avoided, but can be mismanaged. Yes. So I'd love to hear more about that, or if you wanted to talk more about that.
I love so much what you just said. I had goosebumples the whole time, which is always my indicator of great truth. And, I do Vedic chanting, for those that know, right? And I have been doing a lot of Kali chanting and Durga chanting and Shiva chanting, and also Palden Lamo, from the Tibetan tradition, which is the fierce mother, right? Who, there's a kind of a, to our Western minds, I think sometimes these imageries are difficult for us to comprehend. Like, what is this bloody, raging feminine, thundering around? But this idea of creative destruction, and obviously something is falling while something is rising, and I'm with you. I'm always a little bit delicate around what kind of language I use around things, because these things are hard to define,
Yeah, and very hard to articulate, at least for me.
Mm-hmm.
And but in the Jewish tradition, and we don't have to get off on this in detail, but in the Jewish tradition, in the book of Proverbs, I'll be literal, chapter 8, verse 22, anyone who wants to look it up, the Divine Mother speaks for herself. And she tells us that she is the first manifesting of the divine, and that she's the mother of all creation, and that she delights in humankind. In chapter 9, after she explains a little bit about that, in chapter 9, the author, whoever that was, speaks of her in the third person and says that she established a lodge. This is prehistory, she established a lodge that rests on 7 pillars, and she sends out her apostles, who are all women, to bring in all humanity to study with her. And what we learn when we study with her, and I won't go through a whole list because I probably couldn't remember it anyway, is listed in a book called The Wisdom of Solomon. Solomon studied with her, and he learned pharmacology and zoology and botany and all the sciences that tell us how the world works as a way of getting in touch with how the divine functions in the material dimension. And for her to return, I mean, she's never disappeared in Catholicism. She's never disappeared in certain aspects of Hinduism. There's more about Mary, the mother of Jesus, in the Quran than there is in the New Testament. Mm-hmm. So she's in different forms. She's not always disappeared, but in Judaism and in Protestant Christianity, she became a rarity or sort of sidelined, but she's never gone. So in the Kabbalah in the Middle Ages, she comes back as Shekhinah, the divine presence. When you experience God directly, you experience Shekhinah. So this God is somehow experienced as feminine. When you hear God, this is even older, thousands of years older, according to the early rabbis, when they would hear the voice of God, and this is a completely patriarchal society, when they would hear the voice of God, they spoke of it in terms of a bat kol, B-A-T, like bat mitzvah, daughter, bat, kol, voice. They heard the daughter's voice. I would have thought they would have heard Charlton Heston's voice, that kind of masculine, authoritative voice, but they heard instead the daughter's voice. There is something intrinsically feminine, though I don't know what that actually means, but something intrinsically feminine about our experience of the divine, even in cultures that are so patriarchal as to push women out of the spiritual hierarchy anyway, or a religious hierarchy anyway. So she's always been there, yeah, but she's coming back more forcefully than she has in a long time. And this is going to be, I would say, this is the good news of the Kali Yuga, that there is light at the end of the tunnel. It's just a fiery light that is going to burn away all the crap that we have established as normative in our lives.
Wow.
In our institutions.
Yeah, I'm thrilled that you shared all that. I'm just like, please just talk, right? What I really love, and I kind of want to point this out to everybody, it was one of the reasons why in my introduction I pulled in all those things that you have been involved in. You are, in my opinion, excessively unique in that you pull from all of these practices, all of these religions, and yet you're Jewish, you're a rabbi. So can you talk a little bit about about your journey? You started out as the possible Messiah incarnate, right? I love that so much. I'm sorry, I just love it so much.
No, it's okay. I mean,
I love it.
She was serious when she.
I know.
It was a midnight. She came into my room at midnight one day and just said, "Are you the Messiah?" And I lied and I said no. But so. But yeah, my journey is quite eclectic. I mean, I was raised in an Orthodox Jewish home, but by the time I was in high school, I realized the religion I was raised in, I was outgrowing. It wasn't something I could grow into. It was something I was growing out of. And I was lucky enough, if luck's, if there is such a thing, or it's, beshared, it's fated, it's whatever, synchronicity, to study with these two wonderful high school teachers, Peter Santos and Michael Gelinas. They had gone to India for a summer, came back totally enthusiastic about all things Hindu and Buddhist and Taoist, and they taught classes in the history department on these things. And I took it, didn't know anything about it, and was completely, I just embraced it all. Even though some of it's contradictory, Hindus are not Buddhists and they have fundamental differences, but all of it was just so powerful for me. And what made it so powerful was two things. One, the notion that you and I, everything in the universe is, using Hindu language, is Brahman, is divine.
Right.
And I love that non-duality. It just seems true. I can't prove it, but I don't need, for me personally, I don't need to prove it. I look around and what I see, whether it's animate, inanimate, sentient, non-sentient, what I see is the divine. That's just what's there. And the other thing that grabbed me with the high school classes was there was a practice to experience it for yourself. Now, the teachers I had weren't, this is, public school, so they couldn't teach you how to meditate. Right. But they did say there are these practices and you can go out, and I did. And I went out and found my own teachers in these different things. And you can test the validity of what the Buddha says. You can test the validity of what Ramakrishna says, or Ramana Maharshi, or any of these other people that I've studied either with them, which of course those two are dead, but with their disciples. You can test these things. In Judaism, claims are made that you can't test. You have to accept on faith. Jews are the chosen people. You can't prove that. I reject that. I think the whole notion of a God who chooses one people over others is just a marketing slogan for the people who claim to be the chosen. Just like Christians are saved and everyone else is damned, and Muslims are true believers, everyone else is an infidel. So, those are marketing slogans trying to get market share, get you to join their group because you want to be part of the chosen. Who doesn't want to be chosen? So the craziness, like you said earlier, but I call it the tribalist nature of religion. Those things I just couldn't get into. And because you can't test them, I can't trust them. So I could investigate the truth of interconnection, codependent, pratityat samutpada, codependent arising. And everything is arising in this moment together. And you can test it, you can be it, you are it, but you can experience it. So that really attracted me. And then I moved on in college. I won't go through a year by year thing, but in college I studied Buddhism. That was my major. And I worked under a wonderful professor who was also a Pure Land Buddhist priest, Professor Uno, and he had a friend who was a Zen master, Joshu Suzaki Roshi. I sat sesshin with Roshi. My first one, Leonard Cohen, was called it Jiki Jitsu, the second in command. He was just becoming famous. And, this just totally shaped my life, but I never stopped being Jewish.
Yeah.
Part of it is loyalty to my immediate family, loyalty to my tribe, because I don't have a problem with tribe. I have a problem with tribalism. So I never stopped being Jewish. But what I did do is I started looking for these things in Judaism, and you can find them. In the end, and I'll just jump to, now, I guess, in the end, what I am, though I'm interested in all these religions and I've taught them, in survey courses at the universities at where I live here, what I am is a perennialist. And a perennialist, just so we can, without going on too long, perennial wisdom is the fourfold truth that's found at the mystic heart of every religious tradition, but it's the mystic heart, not the corporate structure. And the four truths are very simple. We've already talked about the first one. Everything is a happening of the one thing. You can call it Allah, you can call it God, you can call it Mother, whatever you want to call it, nature. It doesn't really matter. Like the Rig Veda says, truth is one, people call it by different names. So you have your name. But whatever your name of this thing is, the thing itself is infinite and non-dual. And we're all a part of it, just like every wave is a waving of the same ocean. That's point number one. Point number two is that human beings have an innate capacity to awaken to this. You can move from what Judaism calls narrow mind, mochin de katlut, to spacious mind, mochin de gadlut, that knows that you are a part of this and never apart from it. The third point is that when you have this experience of your own divinity and the divinity of everything else, you cannot help but treat other beings with kindness, compassion, love, justice. It's not a law from the outside that's being imposed upon you. It's just a realization of how best to live that's coming from your own experience from the inside. And then the fourth point is awakening to this. One of the words I use is from a Hasidic tradition, chayut, or aliveness. So awakening to this non-dual aliveness and living by the golden rule, or what the Bible also calls being a blessing to all the families of the earth. That's your highest calling. Those are the two things that comprise the highest calling of every human being. So when I go into Hinduism or Buddhism or Masonic teachings or Theosophical teachings or Wicca or whatever I'm looking at, I'm only interested in the perennial. If they're dualistic, okay, fine, but it's not for me. But if it's non-dual, if it's experiential, and if it has that ethical component, then I'm interested. But there's no conflict. There's no conflict among mystics. The conflict is among the corporate elites of these different religions, because they're fighting for their own superiority and their own power and control. But the mystics aren't like that. Can I go on with one more thing? I mean, I'm just sort of babbling here, but just to make it concrete.
Yes.
In 1984, Father Thomas Keating, who along with Father Basil Pennington created the centering prayer movement based on Benedictine teachings. Father Thomas Keating convened the first of a 35-year experiment that he called the Snowmass Group, because we met at his monastery in Snowmass, Colorado. And he brought together 12 individuals from 12 different traditions. Some of us knew one another, most of us did not. The one thing we all had in common was that we were contemplatives. We were regular meditators, chanters, praying people, whatever. And we would live together at the monastery for a week. That's how I remember, a week, maybe 10 days. And we would follow the life of the monks. When they prayed at 4 a.m, we were up and we were sitting with them, we were praying. But when they went to work, we meditated together, and then we dialogued together. From the very first time I went, it became clear, I think clear to everybody there, that while we all had our own language for explaining what we were doing, while we all had our own methodologies, we were all having the same experience. I'm going to put experience in quotes because experience implies that I was there. Right. But really, when you have that experience, you're not there anymore, right? Rami's gone. There's just whatever. And there's no one there to look at it. But when Rami comes back, then I try to articulate the resonance. In Judaism, it's called rishimu, the fragrance. It's like the fragrance of perfume after the perfume has evaporated. But there's a fragrance that's left, that something happened. And then you try to explain the fragrance in Hebrew, in Sanskrit, in Japanese, in Greek, and whatever Arabic, whatever tradition you're working in. And you use the vocabulary of your tradition. So it sounds different. But when you're sitting in a room together for a week talking about this, you discover, no, we were all going to the same place, which was the source. Yeah. And that's the perennialist position. And there is no conflict there. But you see around the world, in almost, I guess, in many countries, I don't know how many, the opposite happening, where Hindus are killing Muslims in India, and just all over the planet. You could go through every major group. They're all fighting amongst one another over language, basically, but they're not mystics. Right. And that's what I'm interested in, is the mysticism, because that's where the heart is. And I think that's what the mother leads us to. When she burns away everything that's unnecessary, she's burning away the corporate structure and leaving you with the beating heart of the universe and the mystic truths that emerge from that.
Wow. Big, beautiful. Thank you.
And long.
No, it was perfect. We're going to take a break, but I want to say something before we go. I lived in Saudi Arabia for between 8 and 9 years, and during that time, I was on a religious quest and was finishing up a degree. And couldn't attend university, so I was doing a long distance course, and was challenged to quote read the holy books of the main religions and kind of try everything on, and then write a dissertation. And I'm just sitting here with my mouth hanging open. My discovery was that it didn't matter what doorway I went through. I had to go deep enough to where I had that experiential thing where I ended up in the heart, is what I said. I ended up in the heart of divine, where all there was love, if you could say that. But I, at that moment, experienced everything that you just said. And when people try to pin me down and say, what are you? I've always said, I'm a mystic, you know. So thank you so much for that. This is Loretta Brown. My guest today is the amazing Rabbi Rami Shapiro. I'm sorry, I can't even talk. And his book is Judaism Without Tribalism, a guide to being a blessing to all the peoples of the earth. And by the way, I was also told at that point just to be a shepherdess. So I am like, let's just do this. So anyway, Benny, let's take a little station break, and don't go away, because when we come back, we're going to talk about God versus God. Yeah, that's what we're going to do. All right, we'll be right back.
All clear, still live on the old YouTuber.
Oh my goodness, Rabbi, I couldn't love this conversation more.
Well, thank you. So
Wow.
I'm looking at the art behind you. Is that,
Yeah, it's
I
a
mean,
fake,
first I thought it's what?
It's a fake backdrop.
Oh, it's a Zoom backdrop.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But
That's why the top of your head keeps disappearing.
Yes, yeah. But it definitely speaks to my heart. I had this strange experience, you know, when I went to Saudi Arabia the first time in 1987 and got off the plane and had an overwhelming urge to kiss the ground and say, I'm back.
Yeah.
Right, which is scary. And I kind of had the same thing when I went to Egypt. So I've traveled the world a lot, and I've seen people all over the world. And so everything you're saying to me is to the heart.
Now, I was invited once to go on a Hajj by Sufi friends. I didn't go. They said I would have to hide my Jewishness.
Yes, you would.
And I said, no, I'm not doing that. That's everything I hate about religion.
Yes.
Come back in?
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
stand by.
Okay. Oh, that's so beautiful, Betty. Thank you. Welcome back to the original Loretta Brown Show. I am Loretta Brown. You can find out more about me at ReikiOasis.com. And just a reminder, all of these shows are archived. You can download them for free and listen to them anytime you want at the archives for the original Loretta Brown Show at 1150 KKNW. And of course, we're on iTunes, Podcast One, Spotify, Audible. We're all over the place. And we're also live on 1150 AM YouTube. My guest, Rabbi Rami Shapiro. I'll try to talk. My tongue will not talk today, Rabbi. I don't know what's going on. I'm all excited. Anyway, his book is Judaism Without Tribalism, a guide to being a blessing to all the peoples of the earth. And what a wonderful conversation we're having. I would like for you to talk about, because you bring out so many really thought-provoking and good things in your book. I want you to talk about the truth of gods with a small g, gods, and God, and go into that a little bit, and that might lead into, you know, what is tribalism, right? And what is it without tribalism? So
yeah, I mean, we've talked about it a little bit. I mean, God with a capital G is reality itself. Right, so it's this non-dual, intrinsically creative process happening. I mean, the Hebrew word, there's in the book of Exodus, when Moses meets God at the burning bush, and Moses says, "So what's your name?" I got to tell people I can't go back and say I was talking to a shrub, and they said, "Let's leave Egypt. So tell me who you are." And he wanted something deeper than what the people had known before. And God, no, it's a story. I think scriptures are human documents. So this is a story. We're getting more of the theology of the author than anything else. But in the story, God reveals two names to Moses in that experience. The first one comes out as Ehia, which means, well, in English, we usually translate it I am, but it's not a good translation. It's is the verb to be, first person in sort of a future imperfect. So it's this eyeing. It's better as a gerund than as a noun, because it's a verb form, Ehia. So it's like God says, I am the eyeing of the universe. And then, this is not how it's put in the Bible, but this is sort of how you look at it. And then God says, oh, wait, don't say that. They won't understand that. So then God comes up with the second name, which is the unpronounceable, literally, because it's just 4 consonants. The unpronounceable name, which is Yud-He Vav-He in Hebrew, or YHVH or YHWH in English. And that's the same verb, the verb to be, in the third person imperfect. So when I'm looking out at the world, I'm seeing the Yud-He Vav-He happening all around me. When I'm awake to it, I no longer see it as an object. I now see it as subject. And then I speak of Ehia. Jesus oftentimes speaks from the perspective of Ehia. I mean, Jesus is a Jew. This is his material.
Right, right.
So unfortunately, when Christians read it later, they disassociate it with its root tradition. And I think they misunderstand it. So when Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life, no one comes to the Father except through me, the Christian corporate religion says, well, Jesus alone. I mean, now we're into tribalism. Jesus alone has this experience, and you have to go to Jesus and worship Jesus. And the way you worship Jesus is through this denomination or that denomination, or the Catholic Church or the Orthodox Church, whatever it happens to be. If Jesus wasn't a Christian, he never heard of it. So Jesus is a first century Jewish mystic. And I define mystic as someone who is seeking a firsthand experience of the divine, not secondhand. He doesn't talk about God. He experiences God. He experiences himself as the divine, which if he did in India, everyone would say, oh, good for you. You joined the club. That's right. But he did it in the Middle East, and not everyone understood. But when he says, I am the way, the truth, the life, or I am, I and God are one, or, whatever, he's got a multiple, I think there's 7 of these I am statements that he makes in the Gospels. When he's saying that, he's speaking from the Ehia. He's not speaking from the little egoic self of Jesus. He's speaking from the capital S self-realized, aware, divine awareness that each of us carries, though not all of us access. So when he says, I am the way, he's not saying Jesus is the way. He's saying this I am consciousness is the way, the truth, and the life. And no one gets to the divine except through this level of consciousness. So let's, then, I don't know, he doesn't necessarily tell you how to do it, but Buddha might, and Ramakrishna might, and there are other sources you can go to find out how to get into this I am consciousness. So the God with the capital G is this eyeing of the universe, is the happening of the universe that's revealed in Torah in those 2 words. Gods with the small g are all the gods who are in service to the men who promote them. And you can tell the difference. God with a capital G has no church. God with a small g always has church or synagogue, or, some institution. God with a capital G never needs money. God with a small g always needs money. God with a capital G never has an army. God with a small g always has an army, or at least when it can, it has an army. So gods that are about conquering, gods that are about control, gods that are about patriarchy, gods that are about hierarchy, these are small g creations of the imagination of certain human beings who are promoting their own status and power and using lowercase g, God, to establish their status and power. Capital G God, that's where the mystics go. And again, to quote the Rig Veda, truth is one, people call it by different names. It doesn't matter what you call it.
Yeah.
When I'm practicing zikr with a Sufi teacher, and we're chanting Allah, I don't care. It's not like, no, I can't say Allah. I have to say, Ehya or something.
Right.
It doesn't matter, because the word, first of all, it's really all about vibration, but that the word is taking you somewhere beyond language. It's just a gateway to something else.
Yeah.
So you don't fight about these things, but in certain religions, you fight about them all the time.
Yeah.
And so I hope that makes sense. That's the difference. God
yeah,
and
you're activating all kinds of things in me, and I'm thinking about several, because there's so many ways to say this. To me, it's kind of like an elephant in the room, right? I could say am I being guided externally by a set of rules, or internally, right? I could say the embodiment of it, or the connection to it, right? Am I following my head? Am I following my heart? Is this an exclusive club and you've got to wear the red jersey to get in? Like, what do you do? And I read your book, right? Like I really read it and resonated with it at so many levels, because I look out across the world and there's always this division based upon this exclusive club concept, right? My God. So do we all worship the same God?
No,
Yeah.
because when we talk about worshiping God, we're usually talking about the small g God.
Right.
So are we all experiencing the same divine reality when we're doing contemplative practice? Ramakrishna, I don't know what you want to say, tested out Christianity and said, oh, it's there too. And then he went to Islam. Those are the two big religions besides Hinduism in 19th century India. And he said, look, it's the same. I'm having the same experience.
Yeah.
But the gods of the God of a church and the God of a synagogue and the God of a mosque or the God of a Hindu temple, those are usually lowercase g gods. When the mystics talk about, their divine, they may go through the doorway of Ram, but they're ending up in Brahman, in an infinite, unnameable reality. So worship, it depends where your worship goes, I guess. If the worship is self-serving, then it's just the lowercase g. If your worship, though, can take you beyond the God to God, with a capital G,
right?
Then we're having the same experience, just like in the Snowmass group with Father Thomas Keating. We all went through our own doorway, but we found ourselves in the same room.
Yeah, which is, like I said, what I experienced without knowing that, right? I want to ask you, because I really, how do I say this? You are very unorthodox, and I actually am enjoying it a lot, right? Because you really have a message for everybody, not just Jews. But I want to ask you, what is the most important thing that Judaism brings to the world? And what is it? I mean, you are saying it, but what is the message you really want to bring?
Well, the message I want to bring is that the non-dual message of the message of the non-dual reality of which we're all a part. If we can get that, everything else will take care of itself.
Right.
Because then, we're all part of this singular reality. We won't commit suicide by destroying the planet, and we won't commit, genocide by destroying other people's. But the question of what Judaism has to offer is a different question, because I think each religion has something very powerful to offer in and of itself, not taking it outside itself and saying, oh, they're all pointing to the same reality. The mystics do that, and that's my thing. But Christianity has something to offer that Buddhism doesn't. When we're talking on the social level, we're talking on the psychological, archetypal level, each of these religions have something powerful to offer. When it comes to Judaism, I think that what Judaism has to offer that I would say no other religion does as strongly, is it invites you to wrestle with the divine reality that you encounter, not the non-dual God, capital G, that you just, oh my God, there's no wrestling, it's just the reality, I see it.
Yeah.
But Judaism calls us, I mean, the name Yisrael, which is the name Jews are given in the Genesis, in the book of Genesis, means to wrestle with God. So it's this iconoclasm that Judaism brings. It's this willingness to say to tradition, no, that makes no sense. I mean, you could look at the history of Judaism as a history of arguing, of Jews arguing with one another about what the truth is. And even, I won't go into details, but you can even find stories where God says, hey, look, this is the answer. And the people say, no, it isn't. But, we're not doing that. So this ability to argue, now we're not talking mystics now, we're talking on a different level.
Right.
But the capacity to question and to argue and to explore is, I think, essential to Jewish culture. And it's one thing that Jews bring. I was lecturing, I've been to India, not often enough, but 4 times. And I was teaching at the Ramakrishna Mont in New Delhi. It was the 150th anniversary of the birthday of Swami Vivekananda. And they invited teachers from all around the world to talk about their traditions in relationship to Vivekananda. And Vivekananda said something to the effect that every religion brings its own genius to the table. And the question we were all asked was, so what's your genius? And I talked about this arguing thing. Afterwards, during a break, I was swamped by swamis. That's a phrase.
That sounds like a song.
Yeah, all these swamis came up to me and they said, how can we do that? How can we challenge our teachers? How can we challenge our texts? How can we wrestle with all this material? And I said, well, I don't have an answer to that. I mean, become Jewish, you can wrestle with Jewish texts. But to them, it was shocking. I've given similar talks to priests in the Catholic tradition who also said, we can question up to a point, but we can't really argue. And you don't argue with Jesus. So, so anyway, I mean, that's a long way of saying argument and wrestling with these big concepts is, I think, key to what Judaism brings to the world.
I love that. And you do have a chapter in your book about Yisrael, right? The God wrestling,
right? And
kind of what comes out of that, right? There were 3 things, and I don't remember what they were, but
I don't either. And I wrote the book. So,
that's always the problem, isn't it? People are like, well, on page 75, and you're like, I don't know.
Right? No, I have no idea. I have no idea. Like you said, I've written 36 books. And if you ask me about any one of them, unless I have it in front of me and I can look it up, I can't remember.
Yeah, I get it. So you have touched on this a little bit, but you were talking about, I want to ask this question. What is a Jew in tribalist Judaism and what is a Jew in Judaism without tribalism?
So and this is really, I mean, as controversial as my theology might be,
yes,
no one really cares. But when I talk about who is a Jew, then a lot of Jews get very upset.
Yes.
So
I'm sorry to ask that question.
No, in the standard way of answering the question, who's a Jew? When I was young, a Jew is someone born to a Jewish mother, and then decades later, it was expanded a mother or father. I find those, or someone who converts to Judaism under an authorized authority, and then you can fight over who's a legitimate authority, and Jews do that all the time.
Yeah.
I don't find either of those tribalist understandings of any value. I mean, in the book, I'm sort of flippant because I talk about just if this isn't true, but if my mother were a ballerina, that does not make me a ballerina, right? So it has to be something volitional on my part. So from a non-tribalist perspective, which is just my personal perspective, a Jew is someone who calls themselves a Jew. I mean, that's it. I mean, if your mother's Jewish and you don't call yourself Jewish and you say you're nothing or you're Zoroastrian, to me, I mean, conventionally, traditionally, you're still Jewish. But to me, if you don't want to be identified as a Jew, you're not a Jew. I'm not going to make you do it because, oh, I found you have DNA or something. You know, that to me is silly. So the basic answer is who's a Jew is someone who calls themselves a Jew. But then I would say there's a Jew, just someone who calls themselves a Jew. And then there's a serious Jew or an engaged Jew. And that's someone who, and there's many avenues for doing this, but someone who is engaged in Jewish life in one way or another. And I have my biases. And so for me personally, without making a person conform to any traditional religious standard, I think a serious Jew is someone who looks at their consumption and tries to elevate it to the highest environmental and ethical standards they can muster. And that's what I think kosher is all about. I think a serious Jew celebrates Shabbat in one way or another. I'm not saying you have to go to synagogue. I'm not saying you have to, give up, your electronics. And I mean, I'm not telling you how to do it. For me, it's a break from the digital life that I live, and it's a day for, I mean, you could say rest, but it's mostly really a day for play. I engage with my grandson and whatever, but I think you have to have some kind of Shabbat and some kind of kosher to be a serious Jew. But then, you could do it totally different. Say, no, I'm totally engaged in social justice, and I do it as a Jew. Well, that's a serious Jew also. So there are different ways: art, literature, social action, religious observance, spirituality. I mean, there's a range of ways to get into the seriousness of Judaism. But bottom line is you have to identify as a Jew. And if someone comes and says, not that anyone is going to say this, I don't think, but my mother's not Jewish, my father's not Jewish, but I'm Jewish. So, okay, you're Jewish, right? It's not like, well, wait a minute, I need to see your conversion card, like there was such a thing. I need some credentials. I don't need credentials. If you want to identify as a Jew, identify as a Jew. It makes no difference to me. Ideally, you become a serious Jew in one way or another, but I'm not going to argue over who is a Jew.
So we've only got like 2 minutes left, believe it or not, but I want to ask you this question. Why does the world need Judaism? And also, because your subtitle here is a guide to being a blessing to all the peoples of the earth. So
very quickly, in the first chapter of Genesis, people are created and they're alien to the planet. The world is doing fine. The garden is fine. Everything is thriving. And people are plopped into it with nothing to do, so they're told to dominate it. In Genesis 2, the world is barren and it's lacking two things: rain or water and humans to nurture it. And so it says in chapter 2, verse 15, that the role of the human being is to protect and to serve the garden. And the word for serve is the same word as to worship, avodah. So it's a holy service. And then in Genesis 12, you get the story of Avram and Sarai become Abraham and Sarah, who are told to leave home and go to this new status of being, new level of consciousness. And what's the purpose? And then it says in verse 3 of chapter 12, to be a blessing to all the families of the earth. So Adam and Eve are not Jews. Abraham and Sarah become the first Jews. So the ideal human mission is to protect and serve the planet. And then the specific Jewish way of doing it is to engage with all beings, human and otherwise, in such a way that you're a blessing, that you serve their thriving. And that's why Judaism, as I understand it, is important, because it teaches you how to be a blessing to all the beings of the earth.
I love that so much. So everybody, my guest today, Rabbi Rami Shapiro, and really, you don't have to be Jewish to read this book. It's really very beautiful. Judaism without tribalism, a guide to being a blessing to all the peoples of the earth. And it might, for those that are Jewish, it's going to give you some things to think about, and many of you may resonate with that. And for those that are not Jewish, it's going to help you understand some things better, is what I'm going to say. So last words, real quick.
Yeah, if you're Jewish and you read the book, it might give you lots of things to argue about.
Thank you so much. Go ahead and get the book now, and everybody have a wonderful, wonderful 4th of July. Be safe, stay in the light, lift yourselves up, and lots of love. Thank you so much, Rabbi Rami Shapiro.